That's not the trailer.
Hello, nerds for Yang.
Hello, nerds.
Hello, nerds.
Hello, nerds.
Hello, nerds.
Hello, nerds.
Hello, nerds.
Now with this campaign, bang, dang, it's and true. Come roll with the Yang Gang.
Hello, nerds.
Hello, nerds.
Hello, nerds.
Hello, nerds.
Oh my goodness. Welcome to the show, Shamrit, Anna, and Veronica. Very excited to learn more about the Vote Like a Woman initiative, especially timely, given that today there's been some Twitter activity about whether the election will happen on November 3rd. You know, hopefully it will. But before we jump into that one, why don't we just start with a little bit of introduction to each of our guests in the same order that we greeted the audience. Shamrit, do you want to just share a little bit about who you are and why you got involved with Vote Like a Woman?
Sure, yeah. First of all, thanks for having us today, Tom. We're super excited to be here. And
Welcome.
I have been volunteering with Vote Like a Woman for the past few months. I think we're all just trying to figure out what can we do over the next 95 days to sort of change the reality of the political situation in the United States. And Vote Like a Woman, A, is a great group of volunteers, but B is also doing really impactful work in registering women to vote, which we'll tell you about in a little bit. And so it's been fun to work on that with this group, and Veronica and Anna can tell us all about it as well.
I'll echo that, Tom. This is really fun. Your show is awesome, and there's a real soft spot in my heart for Yang Gang. I really, it was like a breath of fresh air. Yang's.
Well, 2024 ain't too far away, Anna. We're getting ready.
I think that it was a breath of fresh air on stage to hear his sort of sensible solutions, and I think some of his ideas are, during this pandemic, are really important. But anyway, my background is in tech, but I've been volunteering politically outside of work, and with a group of women from San Francisco who invited me to join this idea of trying to get out the vote 100 years after the ratification of the 19th Amendment. So that's where we're at. And on August 26th, it's going to be the 100th anniversary of women, the first wave of women, not all women, first wave of women getting the right to vote nationally, which is really exciting. And I think that women have found their voice in the last 4 years. You had the sort of all this stuff come out around sexual assault and a lot of harassment, in large part because of the controversy surrounding the Trump campaign. And I think it's so meaningful to be working on helping more women get out and vote and use their voice 4 years later after 2016. So I think that's why I find this work really meaningful, that it combines, like, one, this idea of getting out the vote this year, but two, empowering women and giving them a voice.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. You don't hear leaders talk about that much, I guess because of the COVID stuff. I don't know, but yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, we're surprised too, but I think that, like, there's a lot to talk about. There has been coverage, but we're trying to make more noise around that for sure. That it's a historic year for women in voting.
Well, this will be, I guess, it won't be the first female VP, but it could be a candidate, but it could be the first female VP winner this year. So that would be a nice way to celebrate the 100th anniversary.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Veronica, what's your background and how did you get drawn to Vote Like a Woman?
Thanks for having us. Definitely. I'm a physician. And historically I've done no political work, but I got a sort of a wake-up call in 2016 about my lack of involvement, and so started volunteering and getting involved then. And when this idea came up, or about the 100th anniversary of women getting the right to vote, we wanted to do something to commemorate that. And at the time, it felt like, oh yeah, we'll just make a little noise about it and get people excited. But then the reality, we learned that only 1 in 3 women was actually registered to vote. So that was a huge wake-up call.
Actually, just a correction. 1 out of 3 women are unregistered, not registered.
Oh, right. 1 out of 3 women are unregistered.
Okay,
you know that.
got it.
So not as bad as I just made it sound, but still not great.
Mhm.
And so, our goal was to kind of shake things up and figure out why that is. I think one of the most surprising reasons that we learned is that they just haven't been asked to register. Seems to be one of the #1 causes. And so that seems like something we could change. So our goal really has been around asking women to vote and to register and to commit to not any specific issue or candidate, but really just to being active politically. Because when we don't vote, then we don't have a voice, and we really want women to understand that we want everyone to understand that their vote is their power to make change.
Right on. Yeah, it's especially with the 100th anniversary, you would hope that we get closer to 70-80% registration and turnout. Do you guys know what the participation rate after the folks register, the percent that actually cast the ballot? Because I remember looking at the 2016 turnout numbers. I didn't look by gender, but just overall, it was not as strong a turnout as we had in 08 and 12.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not quite sure what we do know that if you're registered, and especially the year you register, you're more, I don't have the stat, but you're more likely to turn out to the polls. It's fresh in your mind, you get registered, you're kind of committing. And what we do know is that we are asking women to pledge to vote this year on our website. And pledging to vote can increase turnout as much as 5%, especially in populations that are otherwise tend to be not active. So like if you can get people to kind of make an agreement to vote, you can get them to the polls. It's a psychological thing.
Yeah, I just did a little quick search and found a statistic for us. So here it's this is, I think, done by Rutgers, and it shows that you're right on it. The women do turn out more if they're eligible to vote. They tend to report that they voted at a higher rate than men. So it sounds like, but still only 66% or 63%. It was close to 66 in 2008 and 92. So it has kind of fluctuated a little bit. Is your view, is that the organization strategy, register as many as possible, worry about turnout like later, because that's kind of lower in the acquisition funnel, or how are you guys thinking about turnout?
No, we're looking at both. So our big stat is this: 1 out of 3 women who are American women who are eligible to vote are unregistered. Now, more women are registered than men. In that Rutgers University study, it says 10 million more women reported being registered than men. But that's the 1 out of 3 is huge, because it's 38 million women who are unregistered. Yeah. That's a huge population. And that's a huge opportunity to have an impact this year. But we also care about women just getting to the polls. But for now, we're focused on the registration most of all. But we are asking women, we're really into like relational organizing. So getting women to activate their friends, to host discussion circles, to create a virtual voting team through this new app called Motivote. So we care about that side too. But really, like right now, we have this window, we have a pretty short window now to get as many women registered as possible, men and women. But we've got like 95 days left. at this point, 96, 95. Shimrit said 95 today.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to get people registered before they vote. So that means an even shorter window. You want to get people registered far in advance. So, probably you're looking at like a good 60, 70 days to get as many people registered as possible. And I think the other thing to say is like, there's a lot of states that offer online registration. 40 out of 50 states offer online registration. And we looked this up before we got on the call. 13 of those states didn't have online voter registration or even think about it until 2016. So a lot of people don't even know that they can register to vote online. And one thing I want to stress is all of our activities are entirely pandemic proof. And I think that the big thing about this moment in time is that the traditional outdoor voter registration drives are limited, right? Like not a lot of people are going outside, not a lot of people are hosting events. And traditionally, you host these registration drives at big events because you're more likely to get people to actually, register right then and there. And we don't have that. And so these online efforts are really important. The relational organizing is really important. Reaching out to your friends saying, hey, here's online registration for your state. Double check that you're registered and make sure you vote this year.
Let me a question for Shimrit. One of the things I've heard on this channel with some women supporters of Yang was that they had never been politically engaged until his campaign. And part of the reason was they always felt like they were choosing between, lesser of two evils and, it doesn't really change anything. And it's just, they tend not to, some of those folks who hadn't voted in the past tended not to get involved because they felt it wasn't a good use of their time. What do you say to people out there who are like, yeah, Biden, Trump, bunch of old men, whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a difficult time, and I think it's important to recognize that the world is so complex these days, and people don't really understand how government works for them. And it's easy to become cynical and to become resentful and kind of say, well, the system just didn't work for me. And so, either I'm going to cast a resentful vote like that upends, the system, kind of like what a lot of people did, I think, in the 2016 election. It was like an in spite kind of vote, like the system did not work for me and therefore I'm voting for someone to come in and disrupt the system. But ultimately, I think that the main way to counter cynicism, I don't think, we talk a lot, we have this offline chat and we talk about like, we don't have the luxury of being pessimistic and being cynical in these elections. Like we are fighting for the soul of this country, for people's lives. And so we just don't have the luxury to think of the worst. And even with today's headlines, we don't even have like the luxury to be in the pit of despair today with what we're hearing in the news. We just have to continue doing the work. And that's why, Vote Like a Woman has struck a chord with so many of us, because we've really come up with a great campaign, which is $1 reaches 10 voters. So imagine that if you've ever called 10 voters, you know that it's a lot. Only like 2% of them will pick up the phone or whatnot, with $1 reaching 10 voters in a really effective way. And so with these micro donations that we've been effective in getting, and encourage everyone watching the show to consider, like we're really able to reach out to people, get them to register to vote and then to vote. So I think that's one important element. But I really think that, I recently watched two shows that I recommend. The first is Mrs. America, which is about actually ratifying the ERA and like the whole effort around that, and super interesting show. I highly recommend it. And then the second one was the Hillary documentary. And my main takeaways from those two shows is like, from Mrs. America, it was the women activism that got Ronald Reagan elected. It was a group of like 100,000 or 50,000 women banding together and pushing for it, and like we feel like we have that opportunity. Like those numbers make a difference, and so that's one point. And then the other point with the Hillary documentary, so fascinating to think, really what went down in the 2016 elections. So many things in parallel went down. Like it's not as simple. It was just this one thing. But I think that, like women did not turn out to vote like they did for Obama. And we really want to change that.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. Veronica, as a doctor, what are your thoughts on, whether or not having more women in government would affect people's health? Or do you think, men, women, we just want the best representatives we can? Or do you think there's like perspectives that we're missing with the current kind of composition of the government?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think it's important to have a diversity of representation in our government. And, one of our focuses is really on inclusion in our whole campaign. So, we know that African American or Hispanic voters, Asian American voters tend to turn out less. And I think, so we want people, when people see people that look like them in the government, I think that is sort of a motivator. And so that's one way to get people motivated. From a healthcare side, I think that having more women in government is going to just highlight issues that pertain to women more, such as contraception and parenting. And, we have a really abominable death rate amongst women having children in this country. I mean, I think these are things that really don't get talked about. I don't think that necessarily being a woman is going to make you better at treating COVID or not treating COVID, but I do think that just in general, having a healthcare system that is thinking about issues that affect everyone, you need inclusion of all sorts.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. I noticed on your website that the organization talks about part of the strategy is targeted ad campaigns. And that's a hot topic. Everything seems to be a hot topic these days, but that's a hot topic. I mean, it's a use of technology and marketing technology, I would argue, for a good cause, but it's obviously touchy because a lot of people are saying, hey, that there should be no politics like, on Facebook or on Twitter and that kind of thing. Any of you want to share the activities or strategy you're using for online or tech?
Yes, I would love to share. That is has been one of our most impactful tactics, is showing women ads that are empowering, that send them directly to their state's online voter registration site. That the tech for Facebook ads and Snapchat ads is super powerful, and to not use them is sort of, it's a miss, I think. And I think one of the things that I think about, so I happened to work on Facebook ads for nearly 5 years, actually, as a designer. And, it is, I know that there's a lot of controversy around it, but I also want to say that one of the things Facebook ads always was able to do in a very powerful way is help new businesses and upstart campaigns, unknowns, be known. And we're finding so much success, not just on Facebook, but also on Snapchat. So thus far, we've been able to deliver over 600,000 impressions to specifically unregistered women voters. We've been by and large in Arizona, but we've just expanded to Colorado, Georgia, Florida, and Florida, Arizona, Colorado, and Georgia. That's where we're at now. And that's where Shimrit was talking about $1 can help us effectively reach 10 unregistered women voters. That is, it's just so powerful, and to not use those tools is a shame. But I think that it's interesting because we're a nonpartisan campaign. we aren't telling people how to vote. We're helping people to vote, which voting has become, just going to the polls has suddenly become partisan. That's like just as it's American to have the right to vote. But we are flagged as a political ad campaign. And there are a lot of protections now. It's a whole different system from 2016. It actually, Veronica and I, took a lot of time to get authorized to run political ads. And they're both of these platforms, Snapchat and Facebook, by Facebook, I mean Facebook and Instagram, are very careful this year around what kinds of political ads get to run. So I would say,
I can also add to it, because I think Tom, maybe you're alluding to the fact of the controversy around the Trump campaign using like hundreds of thousands of permutations to micro target voters. And, you know, I think anyone is welcome to come to our site, the Vote Like a Woman site, and actually check out some of the copy and the ads that we run. We're very proud of them. They really are driving and getting women to vote. And I think that to register to vote. And so I do think that with any new technology that comes out, you know, it happened with radio, it happened with television, it happened with newspapers, it happens with social media. Of course, it like upends the equilibrium, right? There's this whole new disruptive thing. And so I agree with you. I think we should have a high level of integrity and for example, not use misleading information, not use scare tactics, not use exaggeration. And so I definitely agree with you there. And I think that my hope is that the ecosystem will continue evolving towards that world.
I see you have an ad on your website. Why don't we all take a look at it together? It's a 37-second one, and we'll let the audience get a little taste of what this campaign could look like. So let me just hit play.
Run the English one. Oh, that's
it.
Oh, actually, is this? That's actually the explainer for ads. I would scroll down. Scrolling down. So click the one on the left.
Yeah, my Spanish is not quite there yet. I like it. It's not too long, kind of snappy. And it sort of reminds you of the historic time, 1920 to 2020, of course. And then what is the call to action? Where do they go if they click on it?
So we send them directly to their state's online voter registration site. So they click through without any other, they go straight to the online voter registration site.
So how do you know if they registered? I'm guessing the states don't let you put a tracker on their success rate.
So actually, we're partnering with a new company that was started in part by Reid Hoffman of LinkedIn. It's called Alloy, and they're helping us understand the impact of our ads. So we're able to check whether or not women actually registered after they click through to the registration sites.
And is there what's your big audacious goal? Like, how many registrants do you want to try and land?
Thanks for asking that. But we really want to. I think we're focused most of all on getting to at least 500,000 unregistered women voters in the United States before the voter registration deadlines.
500,000. And how close are we, do you think?
I think we are probably a fourth of the way there right now. We're not bad.
Yeah, and this is a good opportunity to say that obviously, we've been engaging people with different abilities, right, to participate in an initiative like this. We recognize it's a difficult time, and people who are participating are also sponsoring a lot of things. But with Vote Like a Woman, there's really a range of options to participate. Even small donations, $50 reach 500 women. But if that isn't available to anyone right now, we also have registration parties that you can host. We have writing letters, handwritten letters to potential voters. And so there's really a range of things to help with. And we'd love to sign up on the site. We actually monitor that list ourselves and kind of follow up closely with anyone who wants to be involved. And Nerds for America reaches such an awesome audience. We would love to engage with this community much, much more.
And I would just add that you can also just decide to pledge to vote, which I think Anna mentioned before. And there's more power in that than just clicking a button. We ask for a quote of why you think it's important for women to vote. And we actually use those quotes, and it helps us fuel the campaign. So even just your words can be really powerful speaking to other women.
Are you guys focusing on specific states, or is it all just sort of all 50, or how are you thinking about allocating resources?
Well, so the way that we think about it is number one, Veronica talked about the lack of inclusion in the voter turnout. So three of the demographics that show up the least in terms of women voters: Asian American voters, Latina voters, and women voters who are 18 to 24. So we're looking at states, first of all, that have a healthy, population of Spanish speakers, in fact, and they also have good working online voter registration sites, because we want to, reduce the friction as much as possible. We began with Arizona first. Arizona has one of the highest populations of Spanish-speaking people, and they have a great bilingual site, mobile ready. And so that was our pilot, and then we've since expanded to, again, I want to get this right, Florida, Colorado, and Georgia, and with more money we can reach more states. So another plea to donate to the campaign.
And I think somebody just donated, by the way. It's probably not coincidence. We just got a donation. So thank you.
That's awesome.
Thank you, nerds. Yeah.
See how we real life for monitoring the donations coming in. This is a very high touch program we have running here.
Yeah, I love it. So
also tell Tom about our Snapchat ads.
Oh yeah, I'm really excited about those. We just started running Snapchat ads 3 days ago. And one of the things that's cool about Snapchat is that there are many more women who are in that 18 to 24-year-old age bracket, and they've just within the last 3 days we've been able to deliver about 300,000 impressions of our ads, and we've had, I'm sorry, I don't have the stats up in front of me. We've had 2,400 swipe ups. So on Instagram, you swipe up to get to a website, and we've had 2,400 swipe ups, which is a pretty good impact.
Yeah, nicely done. And Landline 51, who is a member of the Nerds for Humanity channel, looks like she just donated to your cause. So maybe she was that notification that you all got.
Thank you.
Hey, you mentioned the 18 to 24 group. There's this thing called TikTok. Are you taking advantage of that? I think they have some women on there.
We did. I'm sorry. I've tried to. We did dip our toe in TikTok. It's a really interesting universe. We created an account one evening and woke up to hundreds of views of our videos and a lot of poop emoji. It's very interesting. It's a different world, and so we're still trying to figure that out. If anybody tuning in knows anything about TikTok and wants to help our campaign, please get in touch.
Right on. Yeah, I guess every platform is a little different, and yeah, I tried it recently. It's like different rules there, different approach. But if you want reach into younger voters, I would imagine there's probably a good number over there. Tamar had a question. Why do you think we have such low registration and turnout for this 18 to 24 group? I mean, you could argue they will have the most time to be impacted by the laws and the leadership. And so economically speaking, it should be the highest incentive for them to participate. But obviously that's not borne out by the numbers. What do you think is going on there? Anyone want to take a swipe at that one?
Well, I think, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I mean, I think there are a lot of factors. One may be that they're new to voting and they haven't been asked. I mean, that would be one of the easiest things. If you don't have a driver's license yet, or you don't have your own home, you may not have run into an opportunity to register yet. We'll say that's the most generous answer, but I'm sure you guys can chime in. Other things obviously are at work.
Shimrit, did you want
I would say the main one is what we talked about, which is young people disproportionately don't see and understand how government works for them. Mm-hmm. And so, as you kind of proceed in your life, I don't want to say age, it's such a harsh word, as you become better over the years, you kind of recognize how government is working for you through infrastructure, through schools, through a healthcare system, etc. And young people, as they're aging, this is something that's around the world. Like, people are not as educated. I also think this is something it's interesting to note, because I actually come from Israel. I was born and raised in Israel, even though I am an American citizen at this point. And in Israel, you actually have a subject at school called citizenship. Where you learn about government, where you learn about why voting is important and how government operates, and you learn it for 3 years, and it's very repetitive, but it kind of indoctrinates you to understand, okay, this is your part of the political system. But ultimately, I do think that it's about this feeling that government doesn't work for them, and then also the fact that they're often not targeted or encouraged, and this is part of what we're tapping into. So again, this feeling of they're young, so, they're not kind of seen as much. They don't have the high conversions that maybe the older demographics have, and therefore they're not targeted as much. And this is one thing that we want to change with with this effort. But I definitely think it's very important. And thank you for that great question, Tamar.
Yeah, one of the things that you go through in high school is everybody goes through driver's ed. And, we just all do it. I don't remember there being a voter's ed or anything like that. I'm wondering, has the organization looked into kind of broader reform around just the registration process and advocating for funding and support for easier, more scalable registration versus right now it feels very opt-in and you have to, click 3 links and finally you can hopefully register?
I mean, that would be, it hasn't been a stated goal, but of course we would want it to be easier to vote. And as we've looked into these online voter registration sites, definitely tech is a factor, in terms of providing good or bad friction for voters. North Carolina asks you to download an app. I mean, that's a big lift for somebody. You go to the site and you have to download an app in order to register. Whereas, again, I really can't say enough about Arizona's online registration site, which is mobile ready, it's super clear how to, use the Spanish version. And again, so the, 2 things, tech and then translating everything into Spanish, because so many people, I don't have a stat off the top of my head, in this country who are eligible to vote speak Spanish.
Veronica, you were trying to get in there as well.
Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think, we're pushing towards the election. We're so close, but this may be work that we continue after the election. And I think focusing back on some of the things that you mentioned, like how do we educate, is going to be really important. I mean, a few months ago, I have 2 children, and home school is challenging, but Anna and I were sort of discussing we should make a homeschool module about citizenship and voting, because there's a great opportunity to provide our kids with something they're not getting at school.
Yeah, the lack of kind of civic education. What do you think is so special about Arizona? Why is their registration so much better than other states? Do they each have to pick their own vendor and kind of figure out all on their own? Like, there's no like kind of best of breed thing where they can just say, oh yeah, we'll take that thing and plug and play?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's just like voting machines. It's under the state to decide how they're going to do it.
Yeah, I think it's important to, like, the way I look at it is like the U.S. election system is by design a very distributed model where, the state power is kind of balanced with federal power, and like voting has a lot of these checks and balances put in place, often with a good idea, but in reality with a lot of paper cuts and barriers to entry that disproportionately also discriminate against young people, older people, people who have less time. For example, the fact that there is not even a holiday to go and vote in the US, and that people have to stand in long lines, like all of these are, kind of evidence to the fact that there needs to be a lot of bottom-up activism to change these, because even though there might have been a good reason for why they came to be, if in reality they're discriminatory and they prevent fair representation in our government, then that's something that we kind of have to change. And it's unfortunate, but many of the people in place have an incentive to maintain the status quo. So it really is up to activism to kind of change these things.
I would also say, we need to talk about the Voting Rights Act has been pretty much, the teeth of it, the federal oversight has been pretty much removed since 2013. And so there are states that with a record of voter suppression that's very much tied to racism, that are able to really make voting hard. And a lot of those states, if you look at the states with bad online voting registration, that correlates greatly to states that have traditionally been prejudiced and tried to stop certain populations from voting, especially Black people.
Veronica?
Oh, I was going to just put a plug out there. One of the things we've been encouraging, especially women, to make sure that they have an ID that matches their voting name, because in many states, women are asked to show an ID, and many women change their name throughout the course of their life. And so they're sort of disenfranchised when you look at that rule. So make sure you have a matching, ID if you need one.
Yeah, that's great advice. My wife goes by a couple of names, and I always have to make sure I buy her plane tickets under the one that's with her driver's license, just to make it easier. Especially with this coming election, it seems like there will be plenty of scrutiny on the ballots that are mailed in and such. So it's especially important with this coming election. I'd love to learn a little bit about the origin story for Vote Like a Woman, like the organization, like who decided to start it, why did, how did it happen? And like, just how has it been so far? Because you guys are kind of like social entrepreneurs. This is a bit of a startup, and always curious about the behind the scenes.
I can start, and then Anna can chime in. Basically, I was at a dinner party, a political dinner party with some other activist friends, and one of them mentioned to me, hey, the 100th anniversary is coming up. This was in 2019, so next year we should do something. And I thought, yeah, we should do something. And so we got some of our friends together that represented different organizations of, different parts of life, and we're not all the same. But then, we're all volunteers, and we have other jobs and obligations. And I'll have to say, Anna really stepped in and really made it a reality by organizing us and doing so much of the work and really engaging people from tech in her world that could help us get things done.
Thanks, Veronica. I think that the big, number one, we realized it was 100 years. Number two, we realized not a lot of people were talking about it. Number three, that stat, 1 out of 3 women are unregistered, was for us pretty jaw-dropping. Like a third of women aren't registered 100 years later. And so that motivated us. And we've since been hugging in our favorite, smartest friends and people and done really well together, reaching out to the right people. We have 6 partnerships with amazing organizations that share our values and mission and provide different strengths. And that's really supercharged our campaign.
Hey, Tom, we have a question for you because you keep asking us questions.
Yeah, go for it.
So how might, as obviously one of the voices for this great community, what are some questions that you feel like our group can answer to engage better, or to, we'd love, what's top of mind? How might we better engage with this amazing momentum that Andrew Yang had?
It's an interesting comparison because with Yang, he struck a chord with a significant number of people who got super enthusiastic. And I think what attracted a lot of us to Yang was he felt like he brought like a breath of fresh air, and a lot of people were and continue to be really frustrated with the current two-party system and just the same kind of solutions being proposed. And so there was like a freshness to it. And because of this, like he had, now people are talking more about basic income, but when he was running, it was like, what are you talking about? That's crazy. And so I think because of that, and then democracy dollars, like, kind of resetting the kind of playing field for finance reform, for campaigns, like vocational education, recognizing the value of women who work full time for the family, but may not, have a W-2 with a normal corporation. Those are all like super refreshing. And so I think for Vote Like a Woman, I wonder, like, how could it go from this very noble and strong argument for, like, of course, we want more representation. This is a right that many people fought hard for, and we should utilize it. And, obviously the stakes are super high, and they always are. It is a little bit harder to kind of like internalize. It's kind of like climate change 20 years ago. Like people knew, oh yeah, we should do something. But then I think that was the difference with Yang. Obviously with Yang, you also had a person. And so to answer your question, Shimri, I don't know if any of this is applicable to Vote Like a Woman, but I do wonder, for people listening who are not political junkies, who are not like super into civil kind of society and engagement, how do you kind of get the attention of that 23-year-old who has a lot on her mind, of which Biden and Trump and November 3rd is just like a lot of noise to them? I wonder, how do you make it more kind of relevant and something that connects in a more deeper and more pragmatic way than the theoretical, which of course I think a lot of us support, but maybe not everybody thinks that way. I think that's what got Yang some success. It was like these very specific, fresh, new things, and then there was a person.
That's good feedback for us. I mean, Yang, if you're watching, we're accepting male allies to our group as well. So feel free to tweet and support
You
the
know who would
cause.
be awesome for you guys if you could connect with Evelyn Yang, Andrew's better half, who is incredible.
Well, follow up offline on this.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not buddies with them, but I could drop a mail.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Well, let me open it up for any audience questions, and then we can wrap up the show. So, if audience out there, if you're watching now live, and even if you're not watching, if you're watching on replay, don't forget to like and share this video. It's always good to feed the algorithm. Secondly, if you're on live now and you have questions for Shimrit, Anna, Veronica about Vote Like a Woman, go ahead and put it in the chat, and I'll try and highlight some of them. And while we're waiting for people to type stuff in, I guess my final question for each of the three of you is, is there a perspective or an argument or an angle that we haven't touched on yet that you wanted to share with everybody out there about this initiative?
Yeah, actually, we've been working with a woman who is a voter researcher and learning a lot about why women who are disengaged in the political process are disengaged. And I found it, and both of you, Shimrit and Veronica, can weigh in. I found it heartbreaking. I think that it's not enough that, you can have a vote without feeling like you have a voice. And I think one of the things that the research tells us is that some women feel really discouraged in having a voice when it comes to politics. And of course, it's not just politics, isn't just politics, it's like how our communities are run. And women have a huge stake in that, and they're often really involved in the community, and they're seeing what's going on, they're seeing what needs to be done. And the idea that so many women out there don't feel like they're potentially, this is what we're finding, like smart enough to make a call, educated enough to cast a vote. It's heartbreaking, it's sad. And I think one of the things that we've been thinking about with our creative is how do we, and like you said about Yang, how do we really make it not this sort of theoretical thing, like getting in, having a political conversation, casting a vote, but it's about what does that mean to have a voice, to stand strong and be represented. And then also thinking about, and this is something that women in particular who are disengaged care about, supporting the community, doing it for your family, for your neighborhood. I think that's a big, strong message we want these women who aren't registered to hear, because that knowing that their vote isn't just for them and their own self-interest, that is for their community, I think is what we're understanding is most persuasive. They don't need to be shouted at. They don't need to be told that their vote is important. They understand it's important, but what they don't get is that vote is their choice, and they're in that ballot box by themselves, and they should be able to exercise that right freely in the way that they want to. And they are, if you're living in a community and living in the United States, you know what's up. You're drinking the water, you're walking down the street, your kids are in school. So if you're in the United States, you have a point of view. And I think that what we really want to do is we really want to make sure that women are encouraged and empowered to exercise their right in that way.
Thank you, Anna. Shimrit, you want to go next, and then Veronica?
Yeah, I mean, and feel free to chime in with questions from the audience. I'm watching the comment stream; it's very lively, but I don't know if you're bubbling of the questions or not. But I love this community so much. It's so great to be here today. I mean, I would just reiterate that if we bubble up to the 10,000 foot view, this is a dark time in history. This is kind of similar to if we were living in the Black Plague, and marry that with so many other fundamental economic and political shifts happening. And what we want to combat is this feeling of paralysis, of this feeling we can't do anything. And like that's a luxury that we just don't have today. Look, we can't collectively control what happens on November 3rd, but we can control how we show up every day until November 3rd. And that's what we really want to encourage. Like, let's go in and just give it the best we can to shape, you know, the government that represents this country well. And not only this country, you know, the leader of the free world. It's a tall order, but I hope that people, that this amazing Nerds for Humanity community comes out feeling energized and feeling like there's so many initiatives to help with. Vote Like a Woman is one of them, but we can really improve the representation and inclusivity, remove these discriminatory barriers, and come up with a government that better works for us.
Thank you, Shimrit. Veronica. Oh, Veronica's connectivity. All right, we'll get Veronica's closing remarks in a minute. I do have some questions. Let's see. Jennifer wants to know about getting people to register in U.S. territories, or like the District of Columbia. Do you find it harder to get people to register because they can't participate in the presidential, or is it kind of similar in territories as well?
Shimrit, do you want to?
I mean, I can just say that this is just another example of the sort of the way that representation doesn't match the population in the U.S. and disproportionately impacts Latino and people of color voters. So DC, Washington, DC is over 50% Black, not represented, can't vote for president. Sorry, I'm blanking, but like several other, islands, etc., that cannot be represented in this election. So I do think that
Puerto Rico,
exactly. Thank you. I do think that this is a key part of what should structurally change as we look into the next 4 years. Tactically, it's not a target that we have, and I can let Anna speak to that more. But yes, it's part of the broader sort of misrepresentation in government today.
A related question from Jennifer is about Native American women. We've had Mark Charles, a Native American presidential candidate, on this show. I was curious, have you had any luck with reaching out to the Native American community? Obviously not a large percentage of the population, but you could argue if any group should be allowed to participate in the government here, it should be the Native Americans.
Oh my gosh, and they have, there's a huge history in this country of suppressing the Native American vote. They weren't even, in 1920, Native Americans weren't even considered citizens. And it was almost explicit that that was sort of something that was called out when the government was making laws around voting, that we need to exclude Native Americans. And that continues to this day. There's some issues around my understanding is that in some cases you're excluded because you live in a place where you only have a PO box, right? And so I think that it is actually really tricky to even to think about targeting Native. Like, how would you? I mean, the question I would have is like, in this pandemic, remotely, reach out to the Native American population, knowing that it's actually they're often. My understanding is that they're potentially in places where they don't have great internet connection, or they're hard to reach and hard to target. It's not like you can target Native Americans on any of these platforms. They explicitly forbid it. So I think that we haven't really invested in that. So I think that the Shimrit's answer is right. I think we haven't really gotten to like territories. We haven't gotten to. We are focused on these three gigantic populations that are less likely to vote, which is Asian American women, Latino women, and women between the ages of 18 and 24 primarily.
Someone in the chat, and I can't find it right now, but they asked I thought it was a pretty kind of provocative question, saying, hey, why is this a women's issue? Why isn't it just a voter registration thing? How would you respond to that?
Well, I think I'll start it off by saying that the name Vote Like a Woman is sort of tongue in cheek. There's no such thing as voting like a woman. It's really voting like a person or a human, but we chose to highlight women because of this 100th anniversary, number one, and number two, the traditionally lower turnout. So it really is not a women's issue, but we're using our ability as a campaign to hone in on that population because of the lack of representation. Anything else you guys want to add?
Yeah, I think again, like coming back to like our raison d'etre, which is 100 years, and then also this stat around 1 out of 3 women not being registered. Now more men than women are registered. More women than men are registered generally by a notch. More women come out to vote generally by a notch. But we have 38 million women who are people who identify as women who aren't registered 100 years later. And we really we're motivated to do something about that this year.
I had another question before we wrap up. I've been involved in a side project that is going to try and help more candidates, first-time candidates, run for office. It's kind of like a Kickstarter for Congress kind of thing. And it's called Of the People. And I'm curious, what are your thoughts about voter registration versus candidate representation? Do you feel like they're two sides of the same coin? And if so, is your strategy to focus on the registration, knowing that it will lead to more representation? Or do you feel like you'll go after representation as well? Like, it's a shame you look at Congress, it's definitely doesn't seem representative. And I'm curious what your thoughts are about that.
My thought is this: I think it's a similar but different problem. So I think there are similar reasons women don't feel like they have the right to a political opinion, as similar to the reason why they don't think that they, of all people, should be running for office. And I don't mean to put this just on women, because there's sort of like, obviously, if you look at what happened to Hillary Clinton, women are scrutinized when they run for office more than men, and so it's scary. But I would say that like that confidence factor, that sort of this idea of like who do I think I am to have a political opinion? Who do I think I am to run for office? I think that's similar. But I think that's a great next thing for us as a group to focus on. This year, we were just focusing mostly on getting out the vote.
I would just add, I think it leads to your previous question. I got kicked out my internet for a while. I think I might be the nerd at my office, but about what our organization is like. We may have, stickers and a fancy website, but we're only a few people doing a lot of work. And I think that what we want to encourage, there's lots of different things people can be out there doing, to support voting and representation, everything we talked about. So all efforts are important. And we just chose a slice of one. And I also want to say that, for people listening, we don't necessarily expect you to go out and start your own movement. Even supporting us a little bit has a huge impact. Everyone's not going to phone bank and text bank, and I guess nobody's knocking on doors anymore. But really supporting our group, we're like a small but mighty team. It'll be an impact, a big impact.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe a good closing note, Tom, is like in this pandemic, at a time when people want to participate, but it's, hard. Actually, our digital only initiative is a nice lightweight way to get involved. So we're pandemic proof as well.
I love it. Yeah, maybe a couple years from now there'll be Run Like a Woman, and we can kind of expand the organization. But in the meantime, I would just encourage everybody watching this to check out votelikeawoman.us. Consider donating. If you aren't able to donate, then maybe think about volunteering or doing both. At the end of the day, this is our government, and the more people that participate, the more we'll end up with a government that kind of reflects our values and what our interests are. So hopefully, of all times, the next 95 days ish will be crucial. And to Anna's point, it's probably closer to 60 with given registration deadline. So this is the home stretch. And for all those Yang Gang who are like, man, Andrew suspended, I've got all this fired up energy, you maybe consider Vote Like a Woman. And that's a good way to help maybe many subsequent elections. Once someone's registered and if they participate, you could kind of get a lot of impact for your effort. So I want to thank you all for coming on the show. It's a incredibly important topic, and thank you for educating me, at least, on the 100-year anniversary. I'm shocked that it's not being talked about, and there aren't like huge events and conferences and even online conferences or big speeches given by our leaders about this stuff. Hopefully that will come soon. I mean, it's such a momentous occasion. But yeah, thank you for coming on the show. And are there any final words before we wrap up?
Vote.
So-
Register your friends.
Yes, register yourself, your friends, your family. Make sure you turn out and vote. I would argue, even if you're not in a quote unquote swing state, people will look at the national popular vote and they will infer the will of the people there. So, even if you're in California, you should still vote.
Yeah, and every little bit helps. Like, don't feel like you're not doing enough or whatever. Just, 5-minute efforts help. Texting a friend, donating $5, whatever is available to you. Like, all these things accumulate, and we're there if we're your vehicle of choice. But also, any other effort is also good. And let's just do this together.
Right on. With that, I'm just going to say goodbye, nerds.
Goodbye, nerds.
Bye, nerds.
Bye, nerds. All